we have been saying much about Fidel over the last few days. In fact, we had honored him and convened a big celebration on his 90th birthday on the 13th of August in Soweto. And we convened all Cuban professionals who were able to travel to Soweto. We hosted them there to celebrate the life of this amazing revolutionary. Now, to speak about Fidel, indeed, many comrades are right. You definitely have to speak about the Cuban Revolution. It's like when you speak about Oliver Tambo, Nelson Mandela, or Joe Slovo, invariably you'll speak about the South African Revolution. But this cadre that we are here about today, Fidel Castro, was a special one. From his days in the youth movement, in the student movement, he led the struggles of young people with absolute dedication. But he had a particular sense of grasp of what needs to be done. He hated dictatorship. And that's the reason why when he, together with other comrades, they established the July 26 movement, which fought for student rights and youth rights and national liberation struggle of Cuba. It's a broad movement. And the SG today was saying, yeah, sorry, can the Communist Party accept that they must come under the ANC and be one movement, like the July 26 movement? So the July 26 movement was a broad movement, which fought for the independence of Cuba from the dictatorship of Fulgencio Batista. That movement was crushed terribly at one particular point in time after the Moncada garrison, which was an army base of Batista, which Fidel and his group of young people went to attack, and many of them lost their lives. Fidel himself was nearly killed. He was saved by a police officer who, at the time when they were arrested, decided not to kill him, but to imprison him. That's how he survived. Then he will go on to a trial, and after the trial, he will make his own speech, like that of President Nelson Mandela. When Madiba said, when he spoke about his commitment to our revolution, in the famous Rivonia's trial, almost the same speech what Fidel did. And he concluded his input by saying, history will absolve me. And that is an important text of speech in Cuba for political education and training. You can hardly now find that text of Rivonia trial in our structures, in the SACP, in the ANC, in the Young Communist League, Comrade Lutuli. When Madiba made a particular commitment to say, for this freedom, he is prepared to die. Not many of us today can say so, because we have weighed down the level of patriotism amongst us and amongst revolutionaries. We are no longer appreciating the value of the revolution. We don't even measure the success of the revolution appropriately. I can give an example, for instance. We built over 4 million houses as a revolution. This is a success of the revolution. We connect water and electricity to millions of our people. When the time comes, the time to test the people to defend the revolution, majority of them don't do it consciously. They get irritated by one particular individual or by a collective of leadership, then they punish the movement all the time, without necessarily looking at the successes of the revolution. How do you justify sitting or staying in an RDP house, what we call the RDP house, which is actually a house brought about by the revolution, because this revolution has recognized that one fundamental aspect or outcome of a revolution is to provide shelter for the people. The people don't vote for this movement because they don't see, there's no correlation between that shelter provided by the revolution and their situation. So Fidel Castro elevated the sphere of the battle of ideas as a strategic task of the revolution. We don't even today, Comrade Jesse, own a progressive radio station or television or newspaper as a liberation movement. And we think our ideas will be dominant in society. You know, Karl Marx had once said that the dominant views in society are those of the ruling class. If you visit Cuba today, now the point I was raising, comrades, is that Karl Marx says the dominant views in society are those of the ruling class. If you go to Cuba today, you won't see all this nonsensical advertisement about anything else. You see the advertisement of the revolution. Now, Young Communist League, at least you are the only ones that I can give instructions. And our comrades in the ANC Youth League, but at least the Young Communist League I can give instructions. We need slogans about Fidel Castro. We need slogans about our revolution right across the country. His messages. We need graffiti. Do it youthful. In Cuba, that's what you arrive there, you see the revolution in practice. You feel now this territory is a revolutionary territory. In our case, we win the revolution, we hand it over to the ruling class. We are not the ruling class as the liberation movement headed by the African National Congress. We are the ruling party. The ruling class are the owners of the means of production, those who continue to control the economy, big capital. It is the same forces that collude with Israeli government to oppress Palestinians. It is the same forces that continue to sabotage our revolution, that are seeking regime change in our country. Now, how do you fight them without ideas? That is why Fidel, I quote him, he says, the ideas are a major force. As much as discipline, revolutionary discipline, it's a major force for mass mobilization. So we must not just talk about Fidel and not bring him here, back home. Because when he sent soldiers to come and train our comrades in Angola and to train cadres of the MPLA, selflessly, they stayed with us in the bases, in the camps. We shared same thing with them. If we didn't have anything to eat, there was nothing special for the Cuban doctors or Cuban combatants who were with us, military trainers. We shared everything together with them. Now, those kind of revolutionaries who are selfless, who are willing to give to the other people without asking anything in return, it's because they were built on values. The values of the liberation forces, the values of revolutionary movement, the values that we used to mobilize our people to confront colonialism and to confront apartheid South Africa. If any great symbol we need to give to Fidel, it's a symbol of ideas of the revolution. That's a monument we need to build for Fidel. We need to rebuild our own relationship and our own marriage with the values of our struggle. We are missing that. And I think it's only fair to say amongst ourselves, we are beginning to miss that. And the imperialist forces can smell the blood. They are salivating. They can feel that these ones, they are no longer committed. They throw in money, we fight amongst each other. They will continue to penetrate. They've been doing the same in Cuba. But they found a revolution fortified from the street committees, committees for the defense of the revolution. After Polokwane, the January 8th statement after Polokwane, Comrade Jesse, 2008, the ANC president and the ANC National Executive spelled out a program to build street committees in this country. Go and ask many of our structures, the SACP structures included. How many street committees have we built? How many still do exist? Anyone can come and do anything in our revolution, in our society, no consequences. Fidel, if we are to celebrate him, we must first elevate his values and celebrate those values. When he said he's willing to die for his country like Madiba did, like Madiba said, he was able with his moral example to mobilize society, and they knew this one is prepared to die for us. When the Bay of Pigs, the invasion of America into Cuba, after they nationalized land, Fidel Castro was shooting the cannon in defense of his country. When ordinary soldiers saw that, they are prepared to die for their country because they see even leaders are not spared, they are in the front line. Although the military strategists will say, no, don't send your generals to the front line, you send soldiers to the front line. But you don't send soldiers to the front line to die. You send them to the front line to win the battle. That is why the generals themselves must be well trained, must be of impeccable credentials, such that any soldier who goes to the front line knows that I have a backup of my general. This is one major challenge that we face, that is facing us today as a liberation movement. Fidel Castro elevated the value of internationalism, and the Cuban people have embraced it. It's in the constitution of Cuba to serve, to do international work by any Cuban. It's in the constitution. What values are we embracing in our constitution? We may as well, Comrade Jesse, look into the constitution and put some few values there. We don't even have a single value of patriotism that mobilizes South Africans behind the mission of our revolution. People decide on their own. I can decide whether to be a true South African or not. I feel nothing compelled. We have to find a mechanism to build this. When the Cuban children sing at school that they want to be like Che, is because the Cuban Revolution elevated Che as the highest symbol of their values and say this one represented us. He was selfless. We will teach our children to be like Che. I had an opportunity to visit one high school in Cuba named after Che Guevara. When I arrived in this high school, we were taken to the library. I must tell you, Comrade Jesse, I've never seen such massive library in a high school, particularly its African section, which I was interested on. Every other thing about our revolution in Africa, in a high school in Cuba. Now, perhaps one mission for us is to collect revolutionary books and send them to our libraries. Our libraries have no books. You go to a library, 90% of it is fiction. Sometimes that is irrelevant to the life of the people. Non-fiction stuff that depict the reality, the living condition of the people are taken out. They are in drips and drabs. I'm not saying that fiction is not good because it's based also on reality. But we can't have a situation where majority of our books in the libraries are about fiction. So when Fidel and the Cuban Revolution reorganized itself, the individual ceases to matter in the revolution. Although the individual is important in the revolution, but it's not the primary. That is why Fidel has always dismissed these attacks on him by the US, that no, they think if they kill Fidel, they will have killed the Cuban Revolution. No. When he fell sick, other individuals like Raul came up. Raul, by the way, for those who do not know, became a communist before Fidel. Yes, Raul and Che were amongst the most advanced communists who had grasped the theory of Marxism-Leninism before Fidel himself. But Fidel also was prepared to learn from them, and of course from the entire revolution. Another thing that the Cubans do well, Comrade DSG, is how they honor their comrades, particularly comrades who fell in the battle. They honor their comrades so well. We don't do it that well. We need to improve there as a revolution. And I know that sometimes we get too much involved in debate whether this is necessary or not. For instance, we have over about 243 graves of MK combatants in Angola. Individual family members decide if they will go and take the remains of their loved ones and so forth. Then we say, no, let's keep that so that we retain our solidarity with the people of Angola who gave us land to launch offensive against the apartheid regime. But having said that, we do nothing about the memory of those who were left behind. We left graves of our combatants in Tanzania, in Uganda, and everywhere else all over the world. What do South Africans think about this? When Cuba brought back the remains of its cadres who died in Angola during Operation Carlota, they built monuments for them. They are revered internationalists. They've got a badge of honor for having participated in liberating the oppressed people elsewhere in the world. Today, majority of our cadres, MK combatants, notwithstanding the problems that we face generally, including other problems, including, for instance, matters of discipline, but MK combatants live in poverty. We try everything, and we are afraid, DSG, to make it a revolutionary task. For instance, I know that we're building houses for MK combatants, for instance, and others who were from the liberation forces. RDP houses and so forth, making sure that they have access to health and all of that and so forth. But you see, when it reaches that stage, it begins to undermine the revolution. Because we have not built enough consciousness amongst the people to appreciate that these are heroes and heroines of our struggle, and therefore they can be looked after by the revolution. People start thinking that, no, the ANC only is concerned about itself. They don't think about the value of contribution that these individuals made in our revolution. Che Guevara, when he wrote in one of his letters to his children, he says to them, I leave you with nothing because I know that the revolution will provide. He was a minister. He says, I leave you with nothing because I know that the revolution will provide. Today, I'm engaged in one businessman who helps me sometimes every year and to contribute food parcels for MK combatants from Thokoza and other SDU leaders that you led with distinction, Comrade Jesse. I want you to come. Actually, I'm extending this invitation. We'll look at the dates. Yes, you were in that battlefront there. You led them. She led them very well, the people of Thokoza. She's a heroine there in my township. But although we have never given you the freedom of Thokoza, you earned it. No, she earned it. Now, we are organizing to go and contribute food only for Christmas for MK combatants. What kind of a society have we become? What kind of a revolution have we become? Where everything is just as normal. We move ahead. So the revolution, that means we have to reflect on the quality and the status of the revolution. So that the revolution, if it can't provide specifically for those who are in the front line, the revolution must be able to do for everybody on equal terms. And children of revolutionaries and revolutionary combatants themselves can benefit from that particular process. I think in thinking about this giant of our international communist movement, Fidel, is to also notice that he was a communist. He was not just any other revolutionary. He embraced communism. After the defeat of that invasion by the US, the Bay of Pigs invasion, 1961, Cuba, Fidel addressed the masses and he told them that what we have just defended, it's socialism. Because now the people have begun to understand the impact of the revolution. It's like, for instance, you know these RDP houses that we have given the masses. Let me give you one example. If the DA ever rules this country, they will ruin those masses. Because they will be kicked out by debt collectors for non-payment of electricity, of water, and this and that. We rolled out some of these free services for the poor. But we have not rolled out the mass consciousness to defend it. So one of the tasks of our youth movement in particular is to mobilize our young people to be patriots. to be patriots of the revolution, patriots of South Africa, to defend our revolution and to advance it. This revolution can be reversed. And I think that the opposition parties and the imperialist backers can begin to salivate because they realize the performance in the local government elections. They are reviewing their strategies. They will come hard. The DA, for instance, I'm sorry, this is a solidarity movement, but I can speak against them. Those are my class enemies. The DA, for instance, they've already launched the so-called 1,000 days campaign. Its own mission is to reverse the success of our revolution. Now, the issue is the revolution must self-introspect so that we don't give them enough arsenal and weapons to hit hard at us and weaken us so that we will be unable to advance and ultimately free the masses of our people who still live in poverty because of the system of capitalism. Cuba was able to deal with capitalism from the onset. They don't have glassy things. One comrade went to Cuba without being long, Comrade Kwara. We went to Cuba. When he comes back, he says, hey, comrade, I encourage him to visit Cuba. When he comes back, he says, hey, comrade, hey, what I've seen there is not the socialism I want. I said, how? What is the problem? He says, no, man. You know, that place feels poor. Then I sit down with him. I said, are you aware that no Cuban goes to sleep without food? Are you aware that every single Cuban, when they get sick, they will have the best specialist available to attend to them? Are you aware that every single Cuban has access to education up to tertiary level? Are you aware that every Cuban has got a place to sleep? What kind of socialism are you talking about? What kind of socialism are you looking at? He wanted some glassy houses like London and the US to say this socialism is successful. The Cuban socialism is the most successful form of socialism worldwide. It guaranteed the basics for the masses. And all thanks to the Cuban Revolution, the people and the leadership of Commander Fidel. So we want to pay homage to this giant of our revolution. And I think that BDS, we want to thank you and encourage you to go further and organize more other events. In line with what Comrade Masuku was saying, I think you have become more than a movement for Palestine, for Palestinian solidarity. Whilst putting the Palestinian struggle at the center, I went to Cuba the other time. There's a big street named after Yasser Arafat. There's a big statue of Yasser Arafat. There's also a good, beautiful statue of Oliver Tambo, right in Havana. The Cubans. So when they talk about international solidarity, it's not some words. It's some real things, something practical. They revere revolutionaries worldwide. And I think that, having said that, their greatest export, of course, is international solidarity. But they've also shown us how to become patriots. That's why they've defended that country from the imperialist blockade, from the Guantanamo Bay, right inside Cuba. We asked them one day, we asked Comrade Raul, we said, but this base is here in Cuba. What happens if they use this base to attack you? He said, no, as minister, he was Minister of Defense at the time, says, as Minister of Defense, if they attack us, we'll defend ourselves, we'll hit back. And the Cuban people will come out in their numbers to defend this country. That's what we need in this country, to defend and advance our revolution. But we need to clean the values of our revolution. With these few words, Comrade Kwara, we want to thank you for organizing this event. We want to extend our condolences to the people of Cuba, to all revolutionaries and communists and socialists all over the world, for the loss of this great mind, the strategists. In fact, in my branch, by the way, we had the Fidelista movement. We had Marxist, Leninist, Maoist. We also had Marxist, Leninist, Maoist, Fidelistas. So that's why there was a cacophony of things there. But at least, I think there will be, Fidel is counted amongst now, after Marx, Lenin, and Engels. We must add Fidel. Because Fidel has taught us what Marx and Engels did not teach us, how to defend the revolution, and to know that the revolution is not just your territory. The revolution is what affects people all over the world. And he said, I want to quote him as my last words, when he talks about how he values the revolution, how to defend it. He says, all and everything for the revolution and nothing against it. Fidel Castro. May his undying spirit rest in peace. Amanda! Thank you very much.